Hello, and welcome to another edition of Todd Talk, where we take teaching theory and turn it into teaching practice. I'm coming to you today from beautiful Ohio Wesleyan University campus, where I'm teaching summer school for gifted. And so today's Todd Talk is going to be about continuing with our idea of students working in groups and the power of being able to create norms in order for groups to be successful. So the idea of setting norms are creating expectations for the classroom for how students will work when they're in a group. The nice thing about norms is these are not rules. They're just the norm. They're just the expectation. And it's not, the nice thing about this is that when you make rules, you have to have someone who's going to enforce those rules. And in 99% of the time, that means the teacher is responsible for upholding these rules. When you set norms as a group, what happens is everyone becomes the ones that are making sure that the norms are being followed. So it's not just one person that's in charge anymore. They all are taking ownership. And also the idea of norms is that because they had a say-so in creating it, there's a little more buy-in. So if you simply give people a set of rules, it comes from someplace else. There's no skin in the game. There's no connection to that. But when you have students create their own norms, that can be very powerful. So the basic idea of setting norms is you ask an essential question of what do I need in order to be successful in a group? And then what you do is you give students piles of Post-it notes or sticky notes. And then for each thing that they need in order to be successful, they place that on a Post-it note. So what that means is they may create 3 or 7 or whatever Post-it notes, each with a different thing they need in order to be successful in a group. Because usually doesn't just come down to one thing. It comes down to several things that they would need in order to be successful in a group. So what happens then is that students then write it on a Post-it note that looks something like this. So here would be an example: work without having to be told to. And then what happens is, as a group, then you begin to cluster these norms. So what I mean by clustering is you take ones. So if I write on a Post-it note, work without having to be told, and someone else writes on a Post-it note, shows initiative, those are the same thing. They're both the idea of someone doing something without having to, have the teacher tell them. And so you would cluster those together. And so I'm going to show you a short video on what it looked like in my classroom when I would cluster things.
As you can see, what has happened just organically and naturally is that we have grouped like ideas together. So I'm going to do my best to try to take these ideas, and as a group, we will create norms that encompass these ideas. Now, some of the ideas may not be possible. So I'll give you an example. One of the norms they came up with in the last group, or the last classes, they were like, well, I need everyone to like one another. Let's be honest, do you need to like everyone to be able to work with them? No, because I will tell you right now with the utmost confidence that at one point in your life, you will work with someone you don't like. But you have to, in order to be a professional and in order to be someone that is successful in the business world, you have to learn to work with those people. So hopefully you're not one of those people, but I'm sure no one in here is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out the biggest clusters first, and then because those are obviously the most important. Now there are some individual ones there as well that might be important, but the issue is it might just be important to one person. If it's only important to one person, then it doesn't really fall into the community environment because there are 7 or 16 other people that it's not important to. So keep that in mind. I appreciate everyone sharing their ideas, but we may not use all the ideas because it wasn't part of the group environment. So I'll start here with our biggest cluster here. All right. This one, I'm going to read each one individually. It says, stay on task. Everyone must be on task at all times. I want everyone to be on task most or all the time.
Any 8th grader.
Never be off task. I would like people to try to focus and be on task. I don't mean necessarily at all times, but usually as long as they don't distract me too much from work. I expect people to be on task. I need people to stay on task. People should stay on task at least 85% of the time. It's very specific. People should be on task focused most of the time and silly when it's appropriate. I need people to be on task when they're doing work. Group members have to be on task. I need the group to be on task. I need a group that's on task most of the time. Okay? So obviously, what is the central theme that we're having there? Yeah. Being on task. Now, the wording of this needs to look very different because there are some people that said never be off task. And other people that said, well, 85% of the time you can be on task, but 15% you can be off task. Or I need a group that's on task most of the time. So we need to find a happy medium. Because here's the reality. You have to think not like in a perfect world, but in the real world. So in the real world, is it realistic to expect everyone to be on task all the time? That's a big, we have 55 minutes. That's asking you to be on task for 55 minutes. Now, I don't know how realistic it is. I don't know if I can be on task for 55 minutes straight. So that might not be the most realistic. Expect everyone to be on task. There needs to be a little wiggle room so that people don't have to be perfect all the time. So now the problem with 85% is, what is 85%? You sit there and say, well, they were on task for 43 minutes of the 55, and that's about a 77%. Do we really have time to do all that? Okay. At the same time, when you say, I need a group that is on task most of the time. So here's the thing. In a 55-minute period, 27 minutes is most of the time. But do you want someone off task for 24 minutes? No. So most of the time, maybe not is not the best descriptor. Okay? So what we should do is come up with a way to phrase this. So the first part of our norm is going to say, stay on task. And how could we phrase it with a secondary part? It doesn't have to be all the time, but it should be most of the time. Yeah?
Stay on task when you're supposed to be doing something that you need to get done.
Okay, that's pretty good. We're going to put that in different wordings. It's a little more fluid. Anyone else have any suggestions? Yeah?
Stay on task when you need to.
Okay. Yeah, and that's a good one, but the question is then, you may think you don't need to be, and your group members may think that you need to be. You may not agree on that. Yes?
Stay on task until you finish your work.
Okay, that could be one as well. But at the same time, so let's say you finish all your work, and now you're off task, but she's not finished with her work. Is that fair to her? What I'm going to encourage you to do is to think about this. Each one of you is holding the other ones accountable. So what I mean by that is that you have a response. You are going to be giving them grades. So what I would say is stay on task, but get refocused when a group mate asks you to. Because here's the thing. You finish your work, you're not finished, so you're off task. You may say, I still need to finish my work. I need to concentrate. Do you mind being a little more focused so that I can get my work done? And she should be willing to do that. Do you think that's fair? Yeah. I think it's completely fair that each and every one of you are able to ask someone to be on task. Now, you need to do it in a kind manner. Don't say, hey, stupid, get on task. Okay? Say, hey, you know what? I really need to get this done, so would you mind getting on task? Okay? So, stay on task. And be willing. So, you're going to write down what I'm writing. So, we have, she's very kindly described for us, and be willing to refocus when asked.
Here's some examples of norms that usually come out of such sessions. So, being able to cooperate with others, other people's opinions matter. You should listen. You should show patience. You should participate. You should stay on task, as I showed in the demonstration. And then you see this one that says, do not dominate the group. The one thing I do try to do with students when I try to rephrase their norms so that they're positive. So do not dominate the group means that it is kind of a negative connotation. So it's something you're doing that you don't want others to do. And so you could rephrase this instead of so do not dominate the group. It could be make sure everyone has equal, parts or everyone is heard or something of that nature, where you're making it more positive, something that you're going to do, not something you're not going to do. And so here's another example of clustering that I did with students. So you can clearly see what is really important to students. So the affinity diagram at the top with so many post-it notes, that is obviously an important topic for students because a ton of them chose it. The ones that are more like just one, like these outlier ones over here, you should still read those to acknowledge the fact that students put that, but it may not be a norm, a group norm. It just may be a student personal preference. So there you have it. Those are norms. And once the norms are created in the class, and so if you have 5 classes, you might have different sets of norms. And so what I would typically do is I would type up these norms on a real big piece of paper, and I would post them around the room. And I would also give students copies of these norms. The important thing about norms is that you revisit them from time to time. So in other words, you don't just put them on the wall and then they're there for people to follow. Every once in a while, you go back to them and you take a look at them, because sometimes you need to revise them, because you may have something that at one point at the beginning was something that was really important, but then you find out it's not. I'll give you an example. When I was working with adults, one of the norms we created is that people be on time to the meeting. But what we found, with busy teachers is that it was nearly impossible for people to be on time. And so we had to get rid of that norm. And so what we did was we changed it to people will make their best effort to get to meetings on time. But we did have to alter that. Or there might be ones that you just get rid of altogether, or ones you need to add once you figure out what the group dynamics are. So using norms can be very powerful in group work, and it makes everyone accountable, and it allows them to work successfully as a group.